Glasgow North is home to a number of very active campaign groups, Amnesty International, Friends of the Earth, Global Justice Now, and many more people who belong to such organisations, even if they don't attend meetings, and then thousands of others who take an interest and want to play their part as good global citizens. And I also hear from them regularly on many of the issues and country situations that have been raised already today: the persecution of Christians in Nigeria, the brutal treatment of Uyghurs and other minority groups in China, violence against Hindus, Sikhs, Ahmadis and Christians in Pakistan, forced detention of protesters in Iran, and of course the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Israel and Gaza. And in all of these situations, the UK government has a role to play. In Nigeria, journalists and digital activists continue to face harassment, threats and attacks by the state simply for expressing critical opinions. Boko Haram continue to act with impunity in many areas and continue to kill, abduct or displace thousands of Christians and other minorities each year. So what is the UK government doing to raise these concerns with the counterparts in Nigeria? What support is it providing to agencies on the ground, both to protect people at risk of violence and to support improvements to governance and political participation? Likewise, in its long and historic relationship with Pakistan, how is the UK government using those links with the country to call out persecution and encourage the authorities to respect diversity and plurality and live up to their international obligations on freedom of religion and belief? And the situation in China has been addressed many times, and I continue to hear from constituents with ongoing concerns about its treatment of Tibet, the persecution of Buddhists, the interference with the leadership of that community, the education of children, and the denial of rights to those who want to peacefully practice Falun Gong or Falun Dafa. So the UK government needs to work and continue to work with international partners, including through the UN Human Rights Council, to ensure that the government of China is held to account.
The Honourable was giving a great speech listing a long list of places of human rights abuses. He just mentioned the UN Human Rights Council. I know that he, like me, has great interest in West Papua, and over 500,000 people have been killed since the Indonesian occupation of West Papua. 70,000 people are internally displaced at the moment. The Indonesians have agreed a UN Human Rights High Commission visit to West Papua, but it hasn't happened, it's been blocked. Shouldn't the government once more press on Indonesia and on the UN that visit must take place? Yes,
I think he's absolutely right. These international bodies have to have a purpose, and if countries like the United Kingdom won't show a lead, who else will? So he's absolutely right, and I fully support his work and congratulate him on the work that he does on behalf of the people of West Papua. I think we also have a role to play. Coming back to the situation in China, each as individuals have a responsibility to consider where some of the cheap consumer goods that we take for granted and we order online, where have they really come from? Whose hands have made them? Market forces can play a part in driving change if consumers, and that means all of us here today, are prepared to ask for and pay for fairly traded, sustainably sourced products. And in the Middle East, the consensus among residents of Glasgow North is clear. There must be an immediate ceasefire on both sides in Israel and Gaza. The release of hostages, the opening up of humanitarian corridors to let aid in and people who want to leave out, and begin the process of negotiating a lasting, peaceful, just and democratic settlement. And condemnation and speaking out against all of these situations is very important and symbolic in itself, but there is more that the government can and must do. It has given itself powers to impose Magnitsky sanctions on individuals who commit gross human rights violations, and it should not be afraid to use those powers. It's negotiating trade deals and disbursing aid funds, and respect for human rights should be at the centre of policy making in both of those areas. And in many situations where people's rights are not being fully respected, it's not necessarily the behaviour of governments, but of large multinational businesses that are responsible. And I hear from many constituents who support legislation to hold companies and corporations to account. I mentioned Colombia earlier, and in many parts of that country, it is large extractive companies or agricultural conglomerates that are displacing whole communities to make way for gold mines or palm oil plantations, even where those communities have refused democratic consent or where displacement would destroy traditional ways of life or make a wider area uninhabitable because of the pollution that it brings. So the government should work here in the UK and with international partners to put the rugged principles on business and human rights on an enforceable legislative footing. Many of these companies are listed on the UK stock market or indeed based here in the United Kingdom, so they should be subject to a rigorous compliance regime. And a wide coalition of charities and other NGOs are working hard on this issue, and quite rightly it should be a consideration not just for the government but for the official opposition and all of us who are preparing manifestos in this election year. Because, as is clear from those who have already spoken and those who will go on to, and from my own mailbox, voters across the country care passionately about the human rights of everyone who lives on this planet. As many of us have said before, if one person's rights are disrespected, then in some respects all of our collective human dignity is also diminished. The Scottish Government and the Scottish National Party are clear that with independence, respect for human rights would be at the heart of Scotland's written constitution. Equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity for everyone who lives in Scotland, and the foundation of Scotland's role on the world stage as a good global citizen. And in the meantime, there are clear practical steps that the UK Government and indeed the Scottish Government and all of us as individuals and voters can take, both to call out human rights abuses but also to seek justice, restoration and prevent abuses from happening in the future. And that should be at the forefront of all of our minds in the months to come through the general election and beyond. Thank you, Dame Maria.